at yesterday's lesson. Most of this is stuff that we have already done. We spent a lot of time last year on proportions. So I'm going to give you a quick refresher. 4 over 21, there's one ratio, equals negative 2 over 15a. The instructions you will see will say solve. What that means is find out what the variable equals. They may not all have a coefficient, a number multiplied by the variable. It could just say plain a. Either way, we need to solve them all the exact same way, and we call that cross multiplying. My habit is I always start with the upper left and do this cross first, but it doesn't matter. You could cross the other way first. Either way will work. 4 times 15a, we cross multiply. Remember, we multiply these. 4 times 15 is 60 times a, 60a. So you do one cross, you put the equal sign. You do the other cross. Right? So remember, the equal sign has to go in the middle. 21 times negative 2, watch out for negatives here, negative 42. Now, to solve for a, what's the final step I need to do? Pammy? Good, I need to divide by 60 to undo that. That leaves just a. And now, because we're working with ratios, I would prefer if you keep these as fraction style rather than just typing this into your calculator to get a decimal. Try to simplify it like you would a regular ratio or fraction. In this case, both of these divide by 6. The negative can stay with the 7, or the numerator. It could go out front, as long as there's only one negative. Remember, a negative divided by a positive makes a negative, so overall our answer must be negative. Now, surely that's too easy for you. How do we make it 8th grade level work? We throw in some binomials. But again, this still should not be very hard. This should be a break from the real difficult stuff. So let's start another example. X minus 4 over 3 equals 2 over 15. Now we just have to be careful that as we do our cross, so again, I always like to start with that first cross. This is 15 times the entire binomial. It doesn't have parentheses around the x minus 4, but that's what we're doing, is 15 times that whole binomial. So anytime there's two terms with a plus or a minus, you probably want to put parentheses around them because we're going to need to distribute that 15. For my second cross, 3 times 2, just 6. Now I need to use the distributive property, so 15 times x, 15 times x, 15 times 4, 60, and I keep the minus there. Remember that we're going to leave the variable alone to solve. We're going to start by undoing the minus 60, and we do the opposite. So I get 15x equals, whoops, that's a 60. So 66, excuse my mess. I accidentally wrote 66 where I was adding it. And by the way, here's why I want you guys to write down what you're doing. I wrote plus 60, and I was already thinking in my head, oh, plus 6 is going to make 66, so I wrote down plus 66. Right, so write it down so that you can, and then I looked at it and I went, wait, that's not 66, it's just 60. So just write it down so that you can keep track of your work. Now if I divide by 15 on both sides, I can get the x by itself. Now again, because we have a ratio, let's keep it. We can leave it as an improper fraction as long as it's simplified as much as possible. So by that I mean that both of these numbers will divide by 3. If I do that, divide them both by 3, I get 22 over 5. 22 and 5 don't have anything in common, no common factors I can divide by, so you can just leave it like that. You don't want to give a mixed number, because if it's a ratio, you can keep it like this. Okay, not too bad, right? Remember that, and I'm not going to do a whole example on this because I think this would be too simple, but just remember that if you have a whole number on one side, for example, this is a real simple one, We're not gonna solve it, let me just show you. Don't forget, you can put that whole number over 1 and then do your cross multiplying. Okay, so one small detail. Now, the only other thing I'm gonna have you do is some word problems. Yay, so here's an example. And again, you won't have to write the problems. With a 5-pound bag of flour, we can make 120 cookies. How many cookies can we make with 2 pounds of flour, or 2 pounds flour? So maybe the recipe says 5 pounds, excuse me. And we want to make all these cookies for the bake sale, but then you realize you only have 2 pounds of flour and you're trying to figure out, well, how many cookies am I going to be able to make? Will we be able to sell enough for our bake sale? Now, we've done this style of problem. Last year we spent a lot of time doing these. So hopefully as I show you how to solve it, it will start to come back to you. There's, first of all, more than one way to solve it. But because we're working on proportions, I'm going to have you set up a proportion. The most important part of this is that you decide which number you want to be in your numerator and that you keep the units the same on both sides. So for example, in this one we've got 5 pounds goes with 120 cookies. Jaden, which one do you want to put on top? 5 pounds or 120 cookies? Either one. Okay, so Jaden decided he wants to go with 120 cookies. Now over to the side I'm going to label it just to remember what I'm doing here. The 120 cookies goes with the 5 pounds. So first of all, I figure out what numbers go together as my original ratio. 120 cookies, 5 pounds. Now you could have done pounds per cookie the other way. All you have to do, whichever way you order it, is on the other side, you keep it in the same order. So the 2 pounds needs to go in the denominator because that's where we put the pounds on the left side. So pounds on the right side. How many cookies? Well, that's my unknown right there. So if you wanted to put pounds on top, both 5 and 2 would go on top, and the 120 and the X would go on the bottom. Keep it the same on both sides. Remember doing that last year? Okay. Now we cross multiply. 120 times 2, 240, excuse me, equals 5 times X, 5X. I divide both sides by 5 to get the X by itself. And we get 48. 48 what? 48 cookies. Don't forget to put a unit on it. If it is a word problem, first of all, you don't need to leave it as a ratio. You can give me a number, right? You wouldn't normally say 48 over 1 cookies. You just say 48 cookies. So if we're talking in a word problem about a real item, first of all, you can give a mixed number or a decimal, and you want to give the unit. 48 cookies would be your answer. So that's it for today. Again, should be all stuff you know.